Well, now it's been a year since the release of Jonathan Hickman's reboot of Ultimate Spider-Man. And if you weren't sure of that, every issue reminds you what month it is. But isn't it kind of funny that we got a reboot for a reboot? Anyways, as of this recording, we are currently 12 issues deep into this new Peter Parker tale, with issue 13 right around the corner, and I am quite excited to see how they deal with a Craven-led story in this universe. So either you're here to enjoy a recap to reflect back on all that we have read thus far, or you're here to see if this series is worth your time because you've been sitting on the fence on whether to read it or not. With that all said, I will warn you, I'm going into full spoilers, so if you want a quick spoiler-free review, here it is. Get off your ass and pick it up. It is absolutely worth your time and money. When it was announced that we would be getting a reboot to the Ultimate Universe, I didn't hear as much backlash as I thought there would be, and any real concerns, especially with the thought of it being a cash grab, were soothed over with Secret Invasion, letting us know that this is a true labor of love, with genuine thought and planning. And most importantly, it's doing what the original Ultimate Universe didn't do enough of. For better or for worse, it's taking major swings to change up the characters. Whereas the original universe was more concerned about modernizing the previously established lore, and did more of a by-the-books retelling of everyone's stories, and for the most part that worked out pretty well. But this new Ultimates universe has truly done some creative changes, with making Reed Richards Doctor Doom, which I can't lie, I am still not the biggest fan of. Getting rid of every hero's superpowers, making Tony much younger and less assholey, making Wolverine the new Winter Soldier, and of course, the best change to any character they've made, making Peter Parker older with a wife and kids. You know, the main thing we've been asking Marvel to do for years now. And man, just based off of that aspect alone, everyone began to froth at the mouth for this series to be released. Especially since we have not had a beloved Spidey run since maybe Superior Spider-Man, which to be honest with you, I've tried reading but was not a fan of it. I had to drop it. Hopefully I can try to give it another go around sometime and connect with it. And the only other recent Spider-Man series to have been well received have been limited ones, with Chip Zdarsky's Spider-Man Life Story and Spider's Shadow. So this series had a lot of pressure to be good because in a way, it's the last real hope of getting a consistent Spider-Man run that we can enjoy. And I gotta say, for the most part, it's flawless. All the characters feel like themselves, but the added little twists they give them make the series stand out and be unique to anything Spider-Man related we've gotten. Making Jonah an uncle-like figure to Peter and his kids, and him truly being a part of the Parker family. Having Ben be this journalist, and just, making him be alive in this universe. MJ running a PR firm, Peter being a father, the Spidey suit being advanced while not going too far with it. Having Harry be Green Goblin, but be a good guy with a darker edge to him. And having Harry and Peter's relationship be a Batman and Robin-esque team-up. There's so many small changes that make this so much fun without it feeling like it's compromising any of the characters. For the most part, which we will get into in a bit. But I just honestly want to keep gushing about this series because my nitpicks don't ruin anything for me. But to get back on track, we pretty much have three main storylines so far. We have Harry becoming Green Goblin and trying to balance his legacy with Oscorp. Peter becoming Spider-Man and balancing his family life. And then lastly, a plotline that has no right being as intriguing and compelling to follow as it is. Ben and Jonah creating their own news site and crossing over Peter and Harry's storylines by having MJ and Gwen help them start up their venture while slowly starting to connect to the main plot of Peter and Harry discovering the Maker's plans, and how Kingpin fits into all of it. And if I had to praise anything with this series, it has to be the character work. I know people have complaints about the pacing, which we'll get into more with the negative aspects of the series in a bit, but damn it man, I love the slow pacing of the series. And that's because I'm genuinely enthralled with simply sitting down with our characters at dinner and seeing them interact with each other. Because Hickman understands how these people communicate. Other than the incredible character dynamics, I think the overall storyline has been impeccable so far, and the first issue did a superb job at explaining why Peter would choose to take the risk of becoming Spider-Man. He feels stuck in life and a bit depressed thinking about how he wants more from his existence, and it doesn't use the same tropes we've seen countless times before. Of hating his job or being in a dead-end marriage with kids that are little brats. He actually enjoys his job at the Bugle. He has a remarkably strong relationship with his wife and adores his kids, who are the most polite little chaps ever. What it really comes down to is this. He simply wants to do something that matters. Don't we all? Don't we want to die knowing we did something grand, something truly great? And even better, knowing we did something for the betterment of the world, for our friends, family, or community. And you see how Harry is in the same position, but because a good portion of that emotional response is coming from revenge and the need to make his father proud, Peter and him have an interesting dynamic. You see that the most when Harry almost kills Black Cat and ends up crippling him, which at first makes you feel like he's solely doing this to release anger and get some revenge on those that have hurt him. But then you get this piece of dialogue. You know something, Peter? If I'm put to the choice and one of them is about to kill you, I will never hesitate. Showing that he is capable of loving and has the ability to build new relationships beyond the past ones he is trying to avenge. Showing that he isn't some sociopath, he is doing this not only to protect those he loves, but you get the sense that he does this because, just like Peter, he wants to do something great for the world and his community. Which gets expanded more when Ben and Jonah discover he's the Green Goblin. Once again, you see his flaws and emotional outrage when he suits up to potentially fight the two men. But when he calms down, you see that genuine concern for the world. I learned that they're evil. Like old as history of man evil. And they need to be stopped. And when he's about to give up the flash drive containing everything they have on the Maker and what he's done to the world, he hesitates out of fear that they might make everything worse, and wanting security, knowing Ben and Jonah have the right intentions and want to help aid in the fight against this new corrupt world order. And speaking of that new corrupt world order, our main villain so far has been Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, one of my favorite villains in all of fiction. And I think he's been okay so far. He feels like the character, but with something missing. It feels like he's a Kingpin that is new to ruling crime, when the story makes it very clear that he's been doing this for quite a while at this point. And with the Maker reshaping the universe, it alludes that this version of Fisk might have been in power for a longer amount of time than any other Fisk we've come to know. But it doesn't come off that way. And he's not so irrationally emotional like we've known most versions to be, which could just be because he's done this longer and has been able to control those emotions. But it honestly comes across more like a vague understanding of who Wilson is instead of it being an alternative take on the character. And now that leads to my only real problem with the series I have. All the characters do feel like themselves, but there's some very important missing traits, specifically in Peter and Ben. Now, it's kind of funny to even have any complaints with Ben, when all we've really had on getting to know the character in the comics was his brief appearance and Spidey's first appearance in Amazing Fantasy 15 in the 5 or so issues of the original Ultimate Spider-Man. But obviously, the character is still very important nonetheless, because in a way that's Peter's moral compass and the main reason he keeps putting on his mask and putting his life at risk every day. And I just wish the series would use that idea to its advantage, and they barely have. In fact, they did a really interesting thing by keeping him alive, but all the story has done so far is keep them mostly separated, so I just wish Ben had a bit more involvement in Peter's life, especially as a moral guide. Now with Peter, I have nothing wrong with the changes they've made. Him having a beard, being older and married with kids, eventually working with Ben. The new suit is awesome with the AI in it talking to him, basically to replace how he usually talks to himself in most of the comics. But what I do have a problem with is Peter isn't much of a genius, which if you know anything about the character, he is one of Marvel's most intellectually gifted people. He doesn't seem to even have an interest in science, which gets pretty much confirmed with all the scenes involving Otto and Harry in the lab. He had no clue what is going on. Another small nitpick I have is that they never really explain where the webbing from Peter's Stark suit comes from. I guess the suit makes it itself, or maybe I'm just missing something. But yeah, those are my 2 character nitpicks and honestly my overall problems with the series. But I will cover 2 problems that I've heard others talk about, and I'll give my point of view on them. I think the first one is the lack of Spider-Man. I honestly haven't had much of a problem with it because this is a very character-focused story. And I personally think there's enough Spidey action to throw in there. It's just not as much as we're accustomed to in superhero media, I will admit that. But the original Stan Lee run would focus heavily on Peter's life, where I honestly feel like when Stan was writing, we'd get more Peter than Spidey. And I'm all okay with that, because to me, more than any other superhero identity, Peter's the most interesting, and he's one I care about the most when he's out of his suit. because he always has been shown to have such human issues that end up entangled in his Spidey life. And in all honesty, I hope as the series goes on, Hickman can find a way to entangle both lives a little bit more and make it a little bit more complex than we've seen it so far. And the last issue I've heard a lot is that the pacing is slow, which I agree, but also heavily disagree with. I think the first 6 issues are very serialized in the way most comics these days are, where they focus more on an overarching narrative than individual stories in each issue. Something this series has become very good at now, making each issue unique and memorable while also creating a larger story. But like I said in regards to less Spidey, it comes down to Hickman being very interested in characters rather than action set pieces. There's not a lot of action, and most of it is people talking, which can make the pacing feel slower, but honestly at the end of every issue, I always feel like there was so much that happened. In fact, amongst the other current comics running, I think this series gets you the most bang for your buck. I can spend close to 30 minutes getting through an issue because there is a lot of reading to do. Where most comics can be read in 15 minutes, and I always feel like I have to stretch it out because I want to get my money's worth. And this just reminds me once again of Stan's original run on the character, because damn, that boy can write. I mean, every issue of Spidey he did was a fucking novel. It takes a cool minute to read one of his Spidey comics, and I love it. You really get to know the characters and fall in love with them. So yeah, once again, this isn't much of an issue for me, but rather an actual plus for the series. Overall, Ultimate Spider-Man isn't just a breath of fresh air for the Spider-Man character, it's a breath of fresh air for Marvel Comics as a whole. I have not been big on pretty much anything they've put out for a while now, with the last 2 series I've read being Zdarsky's Daredevil and Percy's Ghost Rider. And I think that goes for most people. I don't see much praise for current Marvel comics. And for the past few years, it seems like publishers like Image, Dark Horse, and Boom have been making bigger impacts on the comic book community than Marvel and DC have. And now it seems like DC in the past year has caught up to some glory, because holy shit, if you're not reading DC right now, get on that shit. Almost everything they're putting out is excellent. And now Marvel is the only one in the back hoping for something, and now I think they got it. Let's just hope that the lessons they've learned from this new Ultimates universe can now be applied to the one that started it all, and that we can get back to a Marvel universe we all love and adore.